The throne room of the Empire stretched for hundreds of meters. Its walls were made of dark purple stone that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Massive pillars rose toward a ceiling so high that clouds sometimes formed beneath it. This was the heart of an empire that had conquered 47 worlds across 3 galaxies. Queen Vila sat upon her throne, her 4 arms resting on the carved stone armrests. Her skin was the color of deep ocean water, and her eyes glowed with a soft golden light. She was tall, even by standards, standing nearly 3 meters when she rose to her full height. Her people had ruled the stars for 10,000 years, and she carried that weight in every movement she made. Today, however, her golden eyes held something rare. They held fear. Before her, on a pedestal of white crystal, lay the sacred armor of the first queen. It was the most precious artifact in the entire empire. The armor had been forged by the first ruler of the people, back when they were still fighting for survival on their home world. Every queen since then had worn it during times of great importance. Wars had been won while wearing it. Treaties had been signed. Empires had risen and fallen, but the armor remained. Until last night. Vila closed her eyes and remembered. The assassin had come through the window of her private chambers. He moved like smoke, silent and deadly. She had been preparing for sleep when she felt the blade press against her throat. But she was no weak ruler. She had trained in combat since childhood. She fought back. The battle was short but violent. In the end, the assassin lay dead on her floor, his blood staining the ancient carpets. But the victory came at a terrible cost. During the fight, the sacred armor, which hung on its stand near her bed, had been struck. The assassin's energy blade had cut deep into the chest piece, leaving a wound in the metal that went straight through. Now, standing before her throne, her finest smiths examined the damage. There were 7 of them, each a master of their craft. They had spent the entire morning looking at every inch of the armor. Their faces told her everything she needed to know before they even spoke. "My queen," said the eldest smith, a grayskinned named. His voice was heavy with sorrow. "I am afraid the news is not good." "Speak," Vila commanded. Bowed his head. "The damage is severe. The energy blade did not just cut the metal. It disrupted the molecular structure of the alloy. The armor was forged using techniques that have been lost for 8,000 years. We do not know the exact composition of the metal. We do not know the temperature at which it was forged. We do not know the methods used to shape it." Another smith stepped forward. Her name was, and she was known as the greatest weapons maker in the empire. "My queen, I have studied this armor my entire life. I have written 17 research papers on its construction, but studying something and recreating it are 2 very different things. If we attempt to repair it with modern methods, we risk destroying what remains. The old metal will reject the new. The armor will fall apart completely." Vila felt her heart sink. She had 2 of them, as all did, and both of them ached at this news. "So you are telling me that nothing can be done?" The smiths looked at each other. None of them wanted to be the one to confirm it. "My queen," said slowly, "we have consulted with experts from 12 different worlds. We have searched through ancient databases. We have even contacted the archives of the First Age. Everyone agrees. The techniques needed to repair this armor no longer exist. They died with the old masters thousands of years ago." Vila stood from her throne. The movement was sudden, and the smith stepped back in surprise. She walked down the steps and approached the pedestal where the armor lay. She reached out with one of her hands and touched the damaged chest piece. The metal was cold against her blue fingers. This armor had protected her ancestors. It had been there when her great-grandmother unified the warring clans. It had been there when her grandmother pushed back the invasion from the Outer Rim. It had been there when her mother signed the peace treaty that ended 100 years of war. And now it was broken, broken beyond repair. "Leave me," she said quietly. The smiths bowed and hurried out of the throne room. The massive doors closed behind them with a sound like thunder. Vila stood alone with the broken armor. For the first time in many years, she felt truly helpless. She was the queen of 47 worlds. She commanded armies that numbered in the billions. She had wealth beyond counting and technology that could reshape planets. But she could not fix this. She did not know how long she stood there. It could have been minutes or hours. The light from the high windows shifted as the sun moved across the sky. Finally, she heard footsteps behind her. "I told you to leave," she said without turning. "Forgive me, my queen." It was the voice of her advisor, a thin named, "but there is something you should know." What could possibly matter right now? Hesitated. "There is a prisoner in the lower cells, a human. He was captured during the border skirmish 3 months ago." Vila turned to look at her advisor. "Why are you telling me about a human prisoner?" "Because, my queen, he claims he can repair the armor." For a moment, Vila simply stared at him. Then, despite everything, she laughed. It was not a happy laugh. It was the laugh of someone who had been pushed too far. "A human," she said. "You want me to trust the sacred armor of the first queen to a human? Their species has only been traveling between stars for 200 years. They are children compared to us. They still fight wars over patches of dirt on their home world. They still cannot agree on basic facts about their own history." "I know, my queen, but he was very insistent. He said he has seen the armor before in our museums. He said he knows what is wrong with it." "He is lying, or he is mad, or both." Nodded slowly. "Perhaps, but my queen, what do we have to lose? If he fails, he fails. The armor is already broken if he succeeds." He let the sentence hang in the air. Vila looked back at the armor. She thought about what her mother would do, what her grandmother would do. They had not built an empire by ignoring possibilities, no matter how unlikely. "Bring him to me," she said finally. "Bring me this human who thinks he can do what our greatest masters cannot." Bowed and hurried away. Vila returned her gaze to the armor. Somewhere deep in her chest, in one of her 2 hearts, a tiny spark of hope flickered to life. She tried to crush it. Hope was dangerous. Hope led to disappointment. But still it burned. The lower cells of the palace were not a pleasant place. They were carved deep into the rock beneath the throne room, far from sunlight and fresh air. The walls dripped with moisture, and the only light came from small glowing crystals set into the ceiling. Ho had been here for 93 days. He knew because he had scratched a mark into the wall for each one. The marks formed neat rows like a calendar of misery. He was thin now, thinner than he had ever been. The food they gave him was enough to survive, but not enough to thrive. His dark hair had grown long, falling past his shoulders. His beard was thick and unkempt. But his eyes were still sharp, still alive, still watching. He had been a mechanic on the cargo ship Wandering Star. It was not a glamorous job. He fixed broken pipes and faulty wiring. He kept the engines running when they wanted to stop. He was good at his work, but nobody ever wrote songs about mechanics. Then the patrol had found them in disputed space. The captain tried to run, but you cannot outrun a warship. The battle was short. The Wandering Star was captured and its crew was taken prisoner. Most of the others had been released after a few weeks. They were just workers, after all, not soldiers or spies. But Ho had made a mistake. During the capture, he had knocked out an officer with a wrench. The officer had been about to execute one of the younger crew members. Ho had not thought about it. He had just acted. They did not forgive such insults easily. So here he sat, waiting for a trial that never seemed to come. Waiting for a sentence that could be death or could be slavery or could be something worse. The not knowing was the hardest part. He heard footsteps in the corridor outside his cell. This was unusual. They had already brought his food for the day, such as it was. He stood up from the thin mattress on the floor and approached the bars. 2 guards appeared, their blue faces expressionless. Between them walked a thinner in fine robes. This one looked important. He looked like someone who had never seen the inside of a prison cell in his entire life. Human, the robed said. You made a claim yesterday. You said you could repair the sacred armor. Ho nodded slowly. He remembered the conversation. One of the guards had been complaining about something and Ho had listened. He always listened. Information was valuable, especially for a prisoner. I did, he said. Why would you say such a thing? Ho shrugged, because it is true. The robed studied him for a long moment. I am advisor to Queen Vila. She has agreed to see you. Do not make me regret bringing this to her attention. The guards opened the cell door. They placed heavy chains on his wrists and ankles. Then they led him out of the lower cells, upstairs and through corridors that grew steadily more beautiful. The rough stone gave way to polished marble. The dripping water gave way to fountains and gardens. Finally, they reached the throne room. Ho had seen impressive things in his life. He had seen the rings of Saturn from a ship's window. He had seen the twin suns of rise over an alien ocean. But the throne room of the Empire took his breath away. It was massive. It was ancient. It was designed to make anyone who entered feel small and insignificant. It worked. At the far end of the room, on a throne of dark stone, sat the queen. She was the most striking being Ho had ever seen. Her skin was the color of a deep blue sea. Her golden eyes seemed to glow from within. 4 arms rested on her throne, each one decorated with rings and bracelets of precious metal. Between them, on a pedestal of white crystal, lay the armor. Ho felt his heart beat faster. He had seen images of this armor in the databases. He had read about its history, but seeing it in person was something else entirely. Even damaged, it was beautiful. The metal had a quality that was hard to describe. It seemed to shift and change depending on how the light hit it. So, the queen said. Her voice filled the entire room without seeming to rise above a normal speaking tone. You are the human who thinks he can repair what my finest smiths cannot. Ho bowed his head respectfully. Yes, your majesty. Tell me why I should believe you. Tell me why I should trust the most precious artifact of my people to a primitive from a young species. Ho took a deep breath. This was his chance, his only chance. Your majesty, I mean no disrespect to your smiths. They are clearly masters of their craft. But they are too close to this problem. They see the armor as something sacred, something that cannot be touched by ordinary methods. They are afraid to experiment. They are afraid to try new things. And you are not afraid. I am terrified, Ho admitted. But I have spent my whole life fixing things that were supposed to be unfixable. Engines that were too old, ships that were too damaged, equipment that had no replacement parts. When you cannot get what you need, you learn to work with what you have. The queen leaned forward slightly. Continue. I have studied metallurgy since I was a child. My father was a blacksmith on Earth in a small village in Korea. He taught me that metal has a memory. It remembers how it was formed. It remembers what it was meant to be. If you listen carefully, it will tell you what it needs. Pretty words, the queen said. But words do not repair armor. No, they do not, but I have also studied the images of your armor. I have read every paper written about it. I believe I understand what your ancient smiths did. It is not magic. It is science. Very advanced science, yes, but science nonetheless. One of the queen's advisors stepped forward. It was an older, gray-skinned and bent with age. Ridiculous. This human could not possibly understand techniques that have baffled our scholars for thousands of years. Then let me prove it, Ho said. Give me a chance. If I fail, you lose nothing. The armor is already broken, but if I succeed, you gain everything. The throne room fell silent. Every eye was on the queen. She sat perfectly still, her 4 hands folded in her lap. Her golden eyes never left Ho's face. Finally, she spoke. You have 7 days. You will be given a workshop and basic tools. You will have access to materials within reason. Guards will watch you at all times. If you attempt to damage the armor further, you will be executed immediately. If you fail, You will spend the rest of your life in the lower cells." She paused. "And if you succeed?" "If I succeed, Your Majesty, I ask only for my freedom." The Queen nodded slowly. "Agreed, take him to the royal forge, let him begin." As the guards led him away, Ho looked back at the armor one last time. 7 days. It was not much time, but it was more than he had expected. His father's voice echoed in his memory. "Every broken thing wants to be whole again. Your job is to help it remember how." Ho squared his shoulders. He had work to do. The royal forge was nothing like Ho had expected. He had imagined a hot, dark room filled with fire and smoke. Instead, he found a clean space filled with advanced machines and gleaming tools. The walls were lined with equipment he could not name. Screens displayed data in the flowing script of the language. But at the center of the room was something familiar: a traditional anvil, a furnace, basic hammers and tongs. It seemed that some things were universal, no matter how advanced a civilization became. 2 guards stood at the door at all times. They watched his every move with cold, suspicious eyes. Ho ignored them. He had more important things to think about. The armor had been placed on a special stand in the middle of the room. Ho spent his entire first day simply looking at it. He walked around it slowly, studying it from every angle. He got down on his knees to examine the underside. He stood on a ladder to see the shoulders and neck piece. The guards thought he was wasting time. He could see it in their faces, but Ho knew better. You could not fix something until you truly understood it. Understanding required patience. The damage from the energy blade was worse than it had looked in the throne room. The cut went through the chest piece at an angle, from the left shoulder down to the right side of the waist. The edges of the cut were not clean. They were rough and twisted, as if the metal had tried to pull away from the blade that wounded it. But that was not the real problem. The real problem was older, much older. As Ho examined the armor closely, he began to see other issues. Tiny cracks in the metal that had been there for centuries. Joints that did not fit together quite right. Areas where the original forging had been flawed and patched over with lesser work. The sacred armor was not just damaged, it was sick. It had been sick for a very long time. On the second day, Ho began to take samples. Using the advanced equipment in the forge, he analyzed the composition of the metal. What he found amazed him. The alloy was unlike anything he had ever seen. It contained elements that were rare on Earth, combined in ways that should not have been possible. The metal was both incredibly strong and incredibly flexible. It could absorb energy and redirect it. It could repair minor damage to itself over time. But this self-repair function was broken. Something in the atomic structure had gone wrong, probably thousands of years ago. The armor was slowly dying. The smiths had been right about one thing. Modern repair methods would not work. If he tried to weld new metal to the old, the armor would reject it. The molecular structures would clash, and the entire piece would fall apart. But there was another way. On the third day, Ho asked for something unusual. He asked for fire. Not the clean, controlled heat of the forge's machines. Real fire. Wood and coal burning the old-fashioned way. The guards looked at him like he was insane. One of them actually laughed. "You want to repair the most precious artifact in the Empire with primitive fire?" "Yes," Ho said simply. They brought him what he asked for. He suspected they wanted to see him fail. Ho built his fire carefully. He used specific types of wood, chosen for the temperature at which they burned. He added minerals to the flames, changing their color and heat. The guards watched in confusion as the fire shifted from orange to blue to white. Then he began to heat the armor. He did not heat it directly. That would have been foolish. Instead, he heated a separate piece of metal, one he had forged himself from the materials in the workshop. He heated it until it glowed with the same white-hot intensity as the flames. Then, with steady hands, He placed the glowing metal against the damaged area of the armor. The guards gasped. One of them reached for his weapon, thinking Ho was trying to destroy the armor, but before he could act, something incredible happened. The armor began to glow. Not just the damaged area. The entire chest piece began to pulse with soft white light. The light spread outward, flowing through the metal like blood through veins. It reached the cracks and the flaws and the ancient patches. It touched every part of the armor that was broken or weak. And then, slowly, the edges of the energy blade cut began to move. The twisted metal straightened itself. The rough edges smoothed out. The gap began to close, millimeter by millimeter, as the armor remembered what it was supposed to be. Ho worked for 18 hours straight. He did not eat. He did not rest. He kept the fire burning at exactly the right temperature. He kept the healing metal in contact with the armor. He watched and adjusted and guided the process with all the skill he possessed. By the end of the third day, the cut was half closed. The guards had called for reinforcements. Now a dozen watched from the edges of the room. Word had spread through the palace. The human was doing something impossible. On the fourth day, Queen Vila herself came to see. She did not speak at first. She simply stood in the doorway, watching Ho work. Her golden eyes reflected the white flames of his fire. Her face showed no emotion, but her 4 hands were clasped tightly together. "How are you doing this?" she finally asked. Ho did not look up from his work. He could not afford to break his concentration. The armor was forged with a technique that allowed it to repair itself, but that function was damaged long ago, probably by another energy weapon. The armor forgot how to heal. And you reminded it. I gave it energy in a form it could use. The fire, the heat, the specific composition of my catalyst metal. It all matches what the original smiths used. The armor is not being repaired by me. It is repairing itself. I am just helping it remember how. The queen watched in silence for a long time. Then she turned and left without another word. On the 5th day, the cut was completely closed. On the 6th day, Ho began to address the older damage, the ancient cracks and flaws that no one had known existed. He worked his way across the entire surface of the armor, healing wounds that were thousands of years old. On the 7th day, he collapsed from exhaustion. When he woke up, he was lying on a soft bed in a room with windows. Sunlight streamed in, warm and golden. He was clean. Someone had washed him and dressed him in fresh clothes. He sat up slowly, his muscles aching. The door to his room was open. Through it, he could see the armor. It stood on a new pedestal in the center of what looked like a gallery. The light caught its surface, and the metal seemed to dance with inner fire. It was whole. It was perfect. It was more beautiful than it had been in 10,000 years. Standing beside it, staring at him with an expression he could not read, was the queen. "You should have told me," she said. "Told you what, Your Majesty?" "That the armor was dying, that it had been sick for centuries, that we were losing it slowly day by day and we never even knew." Ho shrugged weakly. "I did not know myself until I examined it closely, and by then it seemed more important to fix it than to talk about it." The queen walked slowly toward his bed. Her golden eyes searched his face. "Who are you, Ho of Earth? What kind of man learns to heal the unhealable?" "I am just a mechanic, Your Majesty, a man who fixes broken things." The queen was silent for a long moment. Then, to his surprise, she smiled. "I think," she said softly, "that you are much more than that." The news spread through the empire like wildfire. A human had repaired the sacred armor. A human had done what the greatest masters could not. It was impossible. It was unbelievable. And yet, the evidence stood in the royal gallery for all to see. The armor was not just repaired. It was transformed. Its surface gleamed with a light that had not been seen in living memory. When visitors stood before it, they reported feeling a warmth, a presence, as if the armor itself was alive and watching them. Scholars came from across the empire to examine it. They used their most advanced instruments, ran their most sophisticated tests. Their findings only added to the mystery. "The armor is stronger than it was before the damage," one report stated. "Its self-repair function is fully active for the first time in recorded history. The structural integrity has improved by 47%. This should not be possible." But it was possible. A human had made it possible. Ho was moved from his small recovery room to a proper guest suite. It had a large bed with soft sheets, a bathroom with running hot water, and windows that looked out over the palace gardens. After 93 days in a prison cell, it felt like paradise. He spent his first day of freedom simply resting. He slept for 16 hours, ate a real meal, and took the longest bath of his life. He stared at the ceiling and wondered if this was all a dream. On the second day, he was summoned to the throne room. The space felt different this time. The last time he had been here, he was a prisoner in chains, surrounded by suspicious faces. Now, the who lined the walls looked at him with something that might have been respect, or at least curiosity. Queen Vila sat on her throne as before, but her posture was more relaxed, her expression less guarded. At her side stood the advisor who had first brought Ho to her attention. "Approach," the queen commanded. Ho walked forward and bowed. "Your Majesty." "Rise, Ho of Earth. You have earned the right to stand before me as an equal." This caused a murmur among the assembled. Equality with the queen was not something granted lightly. "I have questions," the queen continued. "I hope you will answer them honestly." "I will tell you anything you wish to know, Your Majesty." The queen leaned forward slightly. "You told me that your father was a blacksmith, that he taught you to listen to metal, but there must be more to your story. No simple blacksmith's son could have done what you did." Ho was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "My father was a blacksmith, Your Majesty. That part is true. He worked in a small village in Korea making tools and farming equipment. Nothing fancy, nothing special." He paused, remembering. "But my father was also a scholar. He read everything he could find about metallurgy, about the history of metalworking, about the science of forging. He believed that the old ways and the new ways could work together. He taught me to respect tradition while embracing innovation." "And where did you learn about metallurgy?" "In prison, Your Majesty." A small smile crossed Ho's face. "I had nothing but time. The guards sometimes talked about things, not realizing I was listening, and before I was captured I worked on ships that traded near space. I saw your technology. I studied it whenever I could." "Why?" "Because it was beautiful, because it was different, because I wanted to understand it." The queen considered this. "You risked your life to repair an artifact that was not yours for people who had imprisoned you. Why?" This was the question Ho had been expecting. He had thought about it during his long hours in the cell. He had thought about it while he worked over the forge. He had thought about it while lying in his soft new bed, staring at the ceiling. "When I was young," he said slowly, "there was a temple near my village. It was very old. The roof had been damaged in a storm and rain was getting inside. The temple had no money for repairs. The government said it was not important enough to save. Everyone assumed it would fall apart and be forgotten." He took a breath. "But my father did not accept that. He went to the temple every day after his regular work was done. He spent months repairing that roof, using materials he bought with his own money. When I asked him why, he said something I have never forgotten." "What did he say?" "He said, 'Some things are precious because they are old. They carry the weight of all the generations who came before. When we let them die, we lose more than just objects. We lose a piece of who we are.'" The throne room was silent. Even the guards seemed moved. "Your armor is precious, Your Majesty, not because it is valuable, though it is. Not because it is powerful, though it is that too. It is precious because it connects you to your past, because it reminds you of who your people were and who they can be." The queen's golden eyes glistened. For a moment, she looked less like a ruler and more like a person. "And you believe that humans understand this? Your species, who are so young, who fight each other over such small things?" "We understand it better than you might think, Your Majesty. Humans have lost so much over our history, libraries burned, cities destroyed, languages forgotten. We know what it means to lose pieces of our past. Perhaps that is why we fight so hard to save what remains." The queen rose from her throne. The movement was slow and deliberate. She walked down the steps and approached Ho until she was standing directly before him. She was much taller than he was. Her presence was overwhelming. But Ho did not look away. "I made you a promise," the queen said. "I told you that if you succeeded, you would have your freedom. That promise will be kept. You are free to leave whenever you wish. A ship will take you wherever you want to go." "Thank you, Your Majesty. But I hope you will not leave right away." The queen's voice softened. "There is much I would like to learn from you, Ho. Much that my people could learn from humans, perhaps, if you are willing to stay for a while." Ho thought about his life before capture. The endless days on cargo ships, the loneliness, the feeling that he was just another replaceable worker in a vast, uncaring galaxy. Here, for the first time in years, he felt like he mattered. "I would be honored to stay, Your Majesty." The queen smiled. It was a rare expression on her face, but it transformed her completely. She looked younger, warmer, more alive. "Then welcome to the Empire, Ho of Earth. I have a feeling that your story here is just beginning." She turned to address the assembled court. "Let it be known throughout the Empire. This human is to be treated with all respect due to a guest of the crown. Any who insult or harm him will answer to me personally." The court bowed in acknowledgement. And Ho, the mechanic from a small village in Korea, stood in the throne room of an empire that spanned galaxies and wondered what the future would bring. 3 months had passed since Ho repaired the sacred armor. In that time, everything had changed. He had been given a permanent workshop in the palace, larger and better equipped than the royal forge where he had performed his miracle. The queen had appointed him royal artificer, a title that had not existed in the empire for centuries. His job was simple in description, but vast in scope, to help preserve and restore the treasures of the empire. The work was endless, and Ho loved every moment of it. Ancient weapons that had lost their power, ceremonial objects that had cracked with age, machines from the early days of civilization that no one remembered how to operate. Each piece was a puzzle, a mystery waiting to be solved. Not every attempt was successful. Some things were too far gone even for his skills, but with each failure he learned something new, and with each success his reputation grew. The people who had once looked at humans as primitive children began to see them differently. If one human could do such incredible things, what else might their species be capable of? Queen Vila noticed this change. She encouraged it. "You are doing more than repairing objects," she told Ho one evening. They were walking through the palace gardens, a habit they had developed over the past months. "You are repairing the relationship between our peoples." Ho shook his head. "I am just one man, Your Majesty. I cannot speak for all of humanity." "Perhaps not, but you are showing us what humanity can be. That is worth more than any diplomatic mission." She stopped walking and turned to face him. The twin moons of the home world hung in the sky behind her, casting silver light across her blue skin. "I have been thinking," she said. "Our two peoples have had difficulties in the past, border conflicts, trade disputes, misunderstandings that led to violence, but perhaps it does not have to be this way." "What are you suggesting, Your Majesty?" "I am suggesting that we try something new, an exchange program. Scholars going to human worlds to study your culture and history. human experts coming here to work alongside our own, a sharing of knowledge and skills. Ho felt his heart beat faster. This was bigger than anything he had imagined. That would be extraordinary, Your Majesty. It would be a risk, the Queen admitted. There are those in my court who think it is foolish, who believe that humans are too unpredictable, too emotional, too young to be trusted. What do you believe? The Queen smiled. I believe that I have seen a human work for 7 days without rest to save something precious to a people who had imprisoned him. I believe that actions reveal more than words, and I believe that the future belongs to those who are brave enough to reach for it. She reached out with one of her 4 hands and touched his shoulder. It was a gesture of warmth, of connection. Will you help me, Ho? Will you be the bridge between our worlds? Ho thought about his father's village, so small and far away. He thought about the temple his father had saved and the lesson he had learned. Some things were worth preserving. Some connections were worth building. Yes, Your Majesty, he said, I will help. The announcement came 1 month later. In a historic ceremony broadcast across both space and human territory, Queen Vila proclaimed the creation of the first alliance. It was not a military alliance or a trade agreement. It was something new, a partnership based on mutual learning and respect. Scientists would study human adaptability and creativity. Human scholars would learn from history and technology. Joint research stations would be built in neutral space. Ho stood beside the Queen as she made the announcement. He wore formal robes, modified to fit his human frame. Around his neck hung a pendant made from a sliver of metal from the sacred armor, a gift from the Queen herself. This alliance begins with a story, the Queen said to the assembled crowds. A story of a broken armor and a man who fixed it, but it is more than that. It is the story of 2 peoples learning to see each other clearly, learning that strength comes in many forms, learning that the future is built by those who work together. She turned to look at Ho. This human came to us as a prisoner. He leaves as a friend. Let his story be the first chapter of a new history between our peoples. After the ceremony, there was a celebration, music and food and dancing that went on long into the night. Ho found himself surrounded by who wanted to shake his hand, to hear his story, to thank him for what he had done. It was overwhelming. It was wonderful. It was everything he had never dared to dream. Late in the evening, when the crowds had thinned, he found a quiet balcony overlooking the garden. He stood there alone, looking up at the stars. So many of them, so many worlds, so many possibilities. He heard footsteps behind him. He did not need to turn to know who it was. Tired of the celebration, the Queen asked, coming to stand beside him. Just needed a moment to think, Your Majesty. Please, when we are alone, call me Vila. Ho smiled. Very well, Vila. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars. Do you ever regret it? She asked finally. Leaving your home, coming so far from everything you knew. Ho considered the question carefully. Sometimes I miss Earth. I miss the smell of the ocean. I miss the sound of rain on a tin roof. I miss my father's workshop and the way the metal would sing when he hammered it just right. He paused. But I do not regret being here. The universe is vast, Vila. There is so much to see, so much to learn, so much to build. How could I regret being part of that? The Queen nodded slowly. You are a strange creature, Ho of Earth. When I first saw you in chains, I thought I knew exactly what you were. Another human, another primitive, another brief flicker in the long history of the galaxy. She turned to face him. I was wrong, and I am glad I was wrong. Ho met her golden eyes. Thank you for giving me a chance, Vila. Thank you for seeing past what I appeared to be. Thank you for showing me what humanity can become. They stood together as the moons rose higher in the sky. 2 people from different worlds, different species, different histories, united by a broken armor and the belief that some things were worth saving. Far below in the royal gallery, the sacred armor gleamed in the moonlight. It was whole now, perfect, stronger than it had been in 10,000 years. And in its reflection, one could almost see the future. A future where humans and worked side by side. A future where differences were celebrated rather than feared. A future that had seemed impossible just a few months ago. But Ho had learned long ago that nothing was truly impossible. Not if you were willing to work for it. Not if you were willing to believe. His father's words echoed in his memory one last time. Every broken thing wants to be whole again. Your job is to help it remember how. Ho smiled and turned his face toward the stars. There was so much work to be done. And he could not wait to begin.